It might not seem like much, but this little toggle took me all day to code, and it's one of the things I'm very happy with. Hey folks, welcome back to Burnout. This is my devlog as far as my little indie game project goes, my creative side project, and today's update isn't nearly as flashy as some of the other features that I've shown, and as progressive, I guess, as my first devlog with the full weekend build, but under the surface, under the hood, I did a lot of things that cleaned up the code, refactored things, and it's probably one of the most satisfying weekend work sessions that I've had. It's my second weekend work session, so my first one was pretty satisfying. The second one was also very, very satisfying. This one was mainly about interaction, polish, cleaning stuff up, squashing some bugs, and really just getting the systems working as I would like. Firstly, the major event that took me all day yesterday were these toggle buttons. So when I first created the game, I had these push buttons that would switch the work effort from customer projects over to like executive work. That's like, work type 1, you press the button and then all the characters go and work on work type 2. And I always wanted there to be like a toggle switch of like, flip on, like to the left for customer work, to the right for executive work. So I decided yesterday to sit down and code that out and switch all the buttons around, all the logic around. And what it really prevented me from doing is I had a lot of if statements and Boolean checks throughout all my previous code, my previous logic to identify if the button had been pressed or not. And I could just remove all of that and instead just call the signal switch directly from the button itself, like the button status. So it cleaned up the logic that I was writing and it simplified all of my checks because I could just pull the signal directly from the button and figure out what state that button was in. Another thing we did with the toggles was clean up the logic in the scene that I had designed and created, whereas they wouldn't show up in the beginning, they would be locked, not functional, hidden from the scene. And then there's a cut scene that comes in where the CEO crashes in and says, "No, work on my priorities." And the toggles actually switch over from like customer work to executive work. And what I wanted that to happen is the user initially, when they log in, they can't switch it back, right? They can't get the forward progress of their projects back until a certain percentage of work gets completed on that secondary bar. And so just figuring out all the logic for how would that function, I did it with the buttons and with the button presses. So I had to refactor all of that to include the toggle signal switches instead, which was we'll say challenging. I had a lot of Boolean logic in there, and I had a lot of cleanup to do, but it was good. It was good. The design of the buttons too, I spent a little bit of time with. I grabbed these, placeholder ChatGPT images, grabbed them, edited them in GIMP, so that way if they switch on, I basically just cut and moved the handle on the image, so that way there was a position for on, a position for off, and then a little differences in sizes between the two, just so that it would give a little bit more of like a user feedback, but it didn't require me to code out anything that was like an animation or anything. It would just pop in and out based on the physical size of that button itself. I also ran into a little bit of a scaling problem and a scaling issue where I popped it in initially, but I had scaled it on the teammate scene, like the sub scene, to look a certain way. So when I set that scale factor of like 0.25 on the teammate scene, and then it loaded into the main scene at 0.25, there was some weirdness with the scaling where it would times the scale factor. So instead of keeping it small that I had intended on the teammate scene, it blew the image up like well past where it should have been. And so that took a little while to figure out of like, oh, these scale factors are compounding, so it's always good to scale 1 to 1 on your subscene, and then when it loads in, that's where your control mechanism to get the position, get the scale, that can all occur on the scene itself that you're trying to import in. But just figuring out okay, we have to keep these at a certain rate when you first create it. So that way you can inject it in multiple scenes at multiple sizes and things like that. That's the important like distinction and logic to figure out. So that took a little bit of doing as well. On a personal note, one thing that I really found enjoyable was creating a global pause menu schema. It's something you really take for granted when you play video games, of like a play, restart, quit menu that appears on every screen that you don't have to really think about. And so I made one. I made a singleton, which is just a single instance, global instance that auto loads when the game gets created. And all it does is present you with very simple options, you know, pause, restart, quit. And then that way, that singleton is available throughout all the scenes. So you just hit the escape button whenever you want to pause, and I don't have to think about how to add that logic, add that code, add those buttons into every scene. So it was something I knew I had to do and knew I had to clean up anyways. So I knocked that out this weekend as well. And then I spent a little bit of time going over storybook ideas and narrative ideas and plot hooks, things like that. How would this story, how would this game start? I've always loved that storybook house idea of character wakes up, character starts his day, gets into the routine, grabs his cup of coffee, you know, that revitalizes you, energizes you. And I thought that would be a good mechanic to add, was just like a little bit of a apartment, walking to work, grabbing coffee, and then heading into the main scene. So I haven't coded anything like that. I haven't drawn anything out. We haven't created anything for that, but that's probably how I want the game to start, is storybook house, walk to work, grabbing your cup of coffee, and then heading into the office. And throughout that one little narrative stripe right in the intro, that's where we can add all the tutorial mechanics and explain the systems, explain the work types, explain the toggle buttons, all that stuff. I can have that happen throughout the beginning of the story. So between the toggle buttons, the pause menu, the, you know, figuring out some storybook elements, this weekend was really spent. This cycle was really spent just figuring out all the mechanics and getting that working, and it was really productive. I was very happy at the end of the day to be able to have a bug free, and I squashed a few bugs throughout the process as well. So I was just very happy at the end game product, where I'm taking another element, another mechanic, injecting it into the like art world, art direction that we're going with the game, and then also figuring out like, okay, what would be next to target within inside of the game loop. So there's no new features, no huge features, no new enemies. I'm starting to think a little bit around what type of style I want the game to be. Like right now we're building some sort of like a world flip book where it's narratively walking the character through like an arc or like a single sprint maybe. But I want to figure out ultimately what's a decent scope for the first iteration of the game. Should it be like a roguelike? Should it be just a narrative book, like a narrative story? I'm still trying to piece that together and figure it out, and then learn new mechanics as we go. As an example, this intro scene that I want to create, I now have to learn how to make sprites walk, how to create sprite animations for them to walk, interactions in the world. So I'm pretty excited to take the lessons I've already learned and then figure out new mechanics with them. So very excited for the following week and getting into all of that. But yeah, that's my readout. That's my devlog 2. And then my mom said my first one was really long, so I'm trying to make this one a little bit shorter. Hi, Mom. I'll see y'all in the next one.